I would talk to people about it, and people would either really get the story, what I was talking about, or other people would go, "Oh, it's a joke, isn't it? Like it's a joke that you kept this gum." And I'm like, "No, I'm deadly serious."
Hi, everybody. So today it's a special evening we've got ahead. We'll be talking with the award-winning maverick of a musician and composer, Warren Ellis. And just so you know, if I'm like staring in this particular direction, it's because that's where Warren is to me. We'll get some eye contact through the screen, you see. So we know Warren best for his rule-turning work with The Dirty Three, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and Grinderman. He won a César Award for one of my favourite film scores of all time for the beautiful drama Mustang. And you'll also find him on capsule projects such as She Walks in Beauty with Marianne Faithfull. His first book, Nina Simone's Gum, is a meditative sojourn through the relics and rituals that become part of our creative journey. The title, it came from Warren's very great initiative of seizing up Nina Simone's gum from her Steinway right at the end of one of her final performances in Britain. And yeah, it's been wrapped in a Tower Records bag since, and it was recently enshrined within silver. And it's just became a sort of talisman of sorts to Warren. And there are like these beautiful whispers of lore around it that you will find within the book. And for me, I just really enjoyed the read, and I think it zooms by in a way that still feels quite calming. So, Warren, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Very good.
How's everybody out there? You okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
So I wanted to start with asking you about the fact that you circle around these alternative messiahs, icons, and prayer in your writing, and in general with a lot of your work. Do you feel a response spiritually to alternative gods often? So in Nina Simone's Gum, you mentioned thinking that your father had written the Lord's Prayer, and then to the talismanic qualities of the gum. So how do you feel about that, this religious experience attached to the things that you interact with throughout your life?
I think for me, I'm not sure what I believe in, but I need to believe in something to make to give me a sense of purpose and being on the earth. I don't think we're just kind of here and that's it. So I'm not really sure where my beliefs lie, but I know from a young age that I believed in some form of spirituality, and at a certain point, I became aware that music, listening to music, actually was a way of was a kind of spiritual experience for me. I don't know, like I went to church as a kid. I read the Bible, or bits of it, I guess. I seem to know a lot of the stories. I read other religious texts and things like that, but I don't consider myself religious in that sense. But I believe in some. I don't really know what it is, but I believe in something, and I think it's a spirituality that connects us all in some way.
Yeah, because it's. I've often found that when we have alternative systems of spiritual belief, it often emanates into objects and perhaps carries a bit of luck. Do you feel that your attachment to objects and the way that you write about it in this book comes back to that? I think
in writing this book, I realised that I had a rather obsessive attachment to things that I don't think I was aware of, but I do know that a lot of other people, when I was explaining the premise of the story, because when I was initially asked to write the story by Faber, I would talk to people about it, and people would either really get the story, what I was talking about, or other people would go, "Oh, it's a joke, isn't it? Like it's a joke that you kept this gum." And I'm like, "No, I'm deadly serious, you know." And then I remember one friend of mine who just sort of sat there and then started welling up in tears, and then she goes, "Oh, I know what you're talking about," and she pulled out a old cigarette packet that she'd had for 10 years since her boyfriend had died, and she's like, "This was his last packet of cigarettes, and I've carried it in every bag that I've ever had since he died." And she looked at me just with tears, and she goes, "I get what you're talking about now." And I think I found in talking to people that everybody had something, whether it was like a spoon collection that, you know, that their grandmother had collected over the whole term of their life, you know, or something. Everyone had something that they felt connected to in a really personal way. And for me, I have these things around me. And as I wrote the book, I became aware that, you know, I'd been superstitious about things all my life, picking up tire weights, you know, whenever lead tire weights when I would see them on the road, because I associated them with good luck, keeping things in boxes and stuff like that. I just thought everybody did this. And, you know, I have these sort of little talismans around that remind me of things, my children, my family, moments. But the chewing gum was something else, because it had belonged to Nina Simone. And so the provenance of it was somebody who'd been touched by the hand of God. And I could see that its greater calling was outside of my cupboard. Because for 20 years, it had been my sort of, you know, creative totem that I'd kept in the towel that she wiped her forehead with, in the Tower Records bag that my dear friend had given me at the concert to put it inside. And it had just been in there, and I never really looked at it. Just knowing it was there was enough for me. And I would derive so much kind of inspiration just thinking about this little piece of gum sitting in the bag. And I realized when I saw, when Nick asked me to put it in his exhibition, or even when I spoke about it in 20,000 Days on Earth, the documentary by Ian and Jane, I kind of realized that it was like a story or like a piece of art, you know, that the idea is one thing, but when it's out in the world, it takes flight. And I could see this chewing gum, you know, like suddenly like people like, do you really have it? You know, have you ever tasted it? What does it look like? What flavor is it? You know, how many pieces do you reckon she had in her mouth? And you know, this sort of story started evolving around it, you know, and people asking questions and da-da-da-da-da like that. But it's like that thing when you make a record or you do a painting or you write a book, until it's consumed by people or it's in the imagination of people, and communal imagination gives ideas flight. So I sort of saw this little thing that I had, suddenly people rally underneath it to try and do the best that they could for it. And I found it incredibly moving and really beautiful. And when I took it to be copied in silver and gold, because I decided if I did lose it, it would just be like catastrophic for me on every level, creatively. Like my whole kind of mojo was going to go, you know, into some cleaner's pocket or something at the Royal Danish Library. And so I set about getting it cast and copied in silver and gold. And that, again, set up this process where the woman that I met, Hannah Upritchard, through a friend of my little brothers from Australia, she took so much care with it. And I was so moved by this kind of continual care and love. And it looked like a process that I've seen in the studio all my creative life with ideas in a really concrete way. I would send a picture to Anne, the Muller Mister, and go, look at this. And she's like, oh, my God, this is like a hair of Christ, you know. And I'd be just blown away by this stuff and thinking like, you know, wow, you know, like it was just sort of cosmic and spiritual and ultimately just really human and beautiful. And I guess that was kind of like where this particular totem that I had seemed very different to the pair of slippers that I've got from my son. You know, the totems that we have that mean something to us, but beyond our reach. You know, it's like the collection of spoons in the thrift shop that, you know, you see it just sitting there with 50p written on it, the little teaspoons. You know that somebody's guarded them preciously all their life and they've meant something, and suddenly they're kind of just 50p, and the whole sort of, you know, the whole love behind them is gone. With this one, it felt like I needed to share it with the world.
Yeah, I think that you managed that really well, the way that you write about relinquishing attachment to something for communal sharing, and that limbo between letting go and having distance. Would you say?
Well, I think we go through this, like artists. People go through this when you go through this when you let your children go. You go through this when you make a record, or you write a book, or you make a film. Like, there's a point where it's within your hands and it's like yours in a way, and then it's gone. Like, you let it go, and there's this beautiful moment when you let it go, and it's terrifying in a way, but you're really happy that other people are going to give it life. And like I said, for me, this whole journey with this piece of gum, because of the symbolic, the importance of it, being belonging to Nina Simone, but also how I'd cared and shepherded over it. It, as I said before, it really reminded me of the creative process and the care that ideas need, and the love and care that you need other people to get under. The tiniest of ideas I've seen in the studio, where people just get under it and they hold it, and it'll either die in your hands or people will breathe life into it. And for me, I would get photos from, you know, people of the gum being cast and all this stuff, and I just found them genuinely breathtaking and moving. Like, it just kept evolving in front of me, and it was, you know, like I said, a process that I felt in a way I could never articulate. And here it was in front of me in a really concrete way. And this beautiful sort of communal idea of taking care of something.
It goes back to the personal as well, because you also had a very similar process with your violin that you describe at the beginning of the book as well. And that really struck me, that sense of ownership of discovering something that used to be yours in a basement.
Well, there was this incredible serendipity that happened around the time I was actually searching for my instruments, because I just toured all my life playing in bands, and when something broke, I'd just get rid of it, get something else and keep moving. And this particular violin that I write about in the book, that's also in Nick's exhibition, was my sort of second violin that I ever, my first violin I ever owned. And I played with it for from 75 until 95. So, you know, I'd been on this tour, and actually I'd bust in Edinburgh. Like, Edinburgh was where I'm really happy to launch this book in Edinburgh, actually, in Scotland, because I had my first kind of communal epiphany playing music in the streets to people there, and realizing that I could play folk music. A guy gave me a book and showed me some tunes to play, because up till that stage I was playing pretty kind of atonal contemporary improvisations that the Scottish people, I don't think, were ready for in 1988, and I don't even think they're ready for it now. It was just like years ahead of the curve. But I learned how to play some tunes, and saw that there was this communication that went on between me and via the music and the people. And I'd sit on the steps at Princess Street station there and play to sort of to pay my rent in a hostel I was living in for a couple of months. And that was like my first sort of experience, and that violin was with me. And I'd also, you know, I guess I'd experienced what was like a really big depression. I'd fallen in love. That didn't happen. I'd kind of found myself in, bloody in the United Kingdom, middle of winter, freezing cold, straight out of summer in Australia, and I was early 20s or something. And I had this violin with me, which I never particularly liked even playing, like it was just something that stuck to me and I could play it. So I had this violin and I played in the streets and like that. And then when Dirty Three started and I joined the Bad Seeds, I had this violin, and then it got broken eventually. And I just forgot about it. And then literally when I was looking for images of instruments, I wrote to Bledden Butcher, who's a photographer, and he said to me, look, Warren, I actually think I have your violin after a photo shoot. So he went into his basement and he found my violin, and it was 20 years later, and there was this beautiful serendipity about it because the gum was being released into the world 20 years after I had it. So it made this link between the narrative, I think, in the book, which was why I wanted to include the violin. The violin, the violin, I happen to have my... Violin's really, it's such a personal thing, it sits next to you, like it's above your heart, it's under your chin, you play into it, like you feel it in your body. This one I've had for I don't know how long, 15 years, but you can see, like there's a life in it, and there's something that at the time, with my other violin, I didn't particularly take notice of it. And then when I saw it all broken up and that this guy had taken care of it, I was incredibly moved that somebody would even bother to look after something of mine like that, And I think, yeah, it actually weirdly gave me something I don't usually do is to think back and reminisce about stuff, and it made me actually nostalgic about certain things. I think maybe that's to do with my age. I'm not sure, but it all felt part of this story.
I think that what readers will find when they engage with the book is that the nostalgia that you describe, we feel it outside of it as well. Is it connected like this? We're coming to your music. I was wondering, would you feel comfortable to read to us while your voice is still fresh?
Sure. Which do you want me to read?
I really like page 73, but I'm a bit biased because I'm a Turk, and that's like a...
Well, maybe we can talk. I mean, basically, has anybody out there read the book in the audience?
And we're getting a few yeses and a few.
Yeah.
And a few
Okay.
soons.
So for anyone who hasn't, this could be what we call a spoiler alert. Usually you flag that in the. Peter Bradshaw's really good at those. I've noticed in his film reviews, he tells you the whole story. But this is a part in the book where I'm looking for. When I sat down to write the book, and I honestly had no idea how to approach writing. I hadn't written ever since the early 80s, and my way of communicating has been music for the last 30 years. And music is either people respond to it or they don't, but I've never felt misunderstood because our language with music is either it moves us emotionally, it does something to us, it does a certain thing. We're not really analysing it in such a way, but most of us have a grasp with language, and I felt incredibly anxious writing. So I was, when I sat down to start working on this, and also being in a domain that I'm really a stranger in. I'm a stranger in music, but I've managed to navigate a path through there. I'm still trying to work out actually what it's all about, the music thing. But so far, it keeps attracting me. And I feel like one day maybe I'll do something really good, and then when I do that, I'll do something else. But that's the thing that drives me and has always driven me is the thought that one day I'll nail something, really amazing. anyway, when I was trying to write this book, I started going through the history of the gum and where I kept it, and seeing every place that had been kept as not a holy place, but like it was important to the story. And at the time, I used to always travel with a briefcase, which this isn't rehearsed or anything, but we're doing a little display in Waterstones, and I actually have to have. So I had this briefcase. This is a Samsonite executive model from the 80s, I believe. It's the rounded edge version, not the large square version, and dark brown. And I put the gum in there when I got it, and it stayed in there for 2 years and travelled with me when I was on tour, because it felt like my kind of good luck totem. So I put it in there, and I in the book I go through talking about where I've had it in this briefcase and what was in there. And when I opened the briefcase, it was just full of stuff that I hadn't bothered to take out or anything. And my house is sort of littered with these old retired computer bags or briefcases or whatever, you know, that just seem to be like these little sort of time capsules. Anyway, this section is talking about that. Should I read from a little bit before, do you think, or should I read the list of things in there, do you think, or should I just kind of plow straight in where you suggest?
Oh, it's up to you.
All right.
I'd be happy either way.
All right, okay. So I'll just start here. I emptied the briefcase on the floor. Inside it was photo booth images of people I couldn't remember, people I could. A brooch in the shape of bagpipes that my grandmother used to wear on a kilt or something. A cross that I'd purchased in Milan in 1988, given to my mother, then she gave it back to me in 1996. A heart-shaped stone that had been given to me by my future wife, Delphine. An empty notepad, a rusted pocket knife with amber keyring I bought in Athens. A photo of Andy Gibb someone gave me. A 64 kb Sharp ZQ3250 electronic organizer. An unfiled tax form from 1997. A fax number for Nick in a hotel in Morocco. An unsigned mute song publishing contract from Andrew King. A photo of a friend's baby. A silver pendant. A broken silver chain. A golden Diamante encrusted broken violin brooch, a silver frog from a violin bow with intricate designs carved in it, cassettes from Mick Geyer labelled Flutes and All, an Iowa Walkman cassette player, a membership card for Motel 6, a letter from Jonathan Richman telling me how to mic up the band for the next recording based on the Who concert that he saw in 1969 with the drawing of the band and microphones, a poem from Jonathan Richman about Dirty Three, a green ballpoint pen from a hospital in Munich, some plastic sachets of Atiki honey, a very dried piece of lemon, a running list for Horse Stories album, admittance form to a hospital in Munich dated 1996, a red Japanese address book, an onamari from a temple outside Yokohama, a book I've never read, an eraser, a mostly empty 8 fluid ounce bottle of Glockengaus number 4711 ice cologne, a 2B Statler pencil, bits of paper that were worn white, theosophical edition of Notes of the Bhagavad Gita, a message from a fortune cookie, a plastic Japanese rabbit pounding mochi with a pestle on a red thread and a bell attached, a spoon from an American diner, a postcard from Dave McComb, 7 gold dental crowns and inlays and 2 teeth in a redhead's matchbox. I remember being in a car in Los Angeles with Nick driving to a meeting with Guillermo del Toro in the early 2000s concerning a score for a potential stop-motion adaptation of Pinocchio drawn by Grizz Grimley. As we pulled up, Guillermo, who I'd never met, was walking down the path towards the car, his smile visible from 100 yards. He opened the door and clocked my briefcase. His already glowing face softened more, and his eyebrows rose above his glasses. I loved those briefcases. I had one in the 80s when I was a student. I had one when I met my wife. Can I carry it inside? Of course you can, I replied, handing it to him. We followed Guillermo into his house. I guessed it was, or his production office, and sat around a large table. The interior of the house was like a museum of every kind of monster and curiosity imaginable. Skeletons, ghouls, mermaids, props from films, pages from books. I opened my briefcase to grab a pad and I saw the gold crowns and teeth rattling around, freed from their matchbox. I had an idea. I threw the idea out there that we could make the percussive aspect of the score using teeth and prosthetic limbs, glass eyeballs and wooden legs, and drop some melodies on top. This was greeted with enthusiasm. We discussed the script and the project. After the meeting, Guillermo turned to me and said, "Could I carry your briefcase to the car?" I watched his hand take the handle and his face broaden and composure shift. He carried the case to the car and handed it to me and waved goodbye. The film never happened. Our connection to things, the stories they remind us of, and the past places and times they make us land in. Time travel, connection, shared stories. I have several of those strange time capsules hidden around the house. They make me think of the wonderful Museum of Innocence in Istanbul, founded by Orhan Pamuk, but without a story yet shared, things that make anywhere feel like somewhere. Nina Simone's gum spent 2 years in that briefcase and traveled everywhere with me when I toured. Amazingly, it was never subject to security checks and sniffer dogs. When I moved to a new house in 2001, I realized it was way too precious to carry around in a briefcase. I was sure I would lose it. After September 11, I was subject to more frequent bomb checks at airport security and figured the gum would be collateral damage. There was a time when a beard was political. There was no way that was going to happen. And as you can see, thank you. As you can see, the book is kind of pictures and can you see that?
Yeah, really clearly actually. It's that's pretty cool.
It's pretty kind of
Is it heavy?
It was. So I have this. This is the bag and the towel of Nina Simone's, and I have this cassette of our letter in here, and these things. If you read the book, they'll make sense. There's a tire weight in here, and a tape recorder, and an old address book from 1996. There I was when I didn't have a beard and full of amphetamines, I guess, or something like that. Fucking having a good time, whatever it was. Anyway, a bunch of X-rays and things like that. And I kind of all this stuff, and there's my copy of the guitar notes on it, mind you, notes. And Marianne Faithfull cigarettes and a packet of her. It's her morphine. When we were doing the record, it's a little thing. I have. Oh, there it is. Look, there's my bagpipe brooch and another book. But it kind of set me off thinking about the story actually. And when I visited that Museum of Innocence, which I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's just the most beautiful. Beautiful achievement where Orhan Pamuk has devised a story by finding objects in shops and written a story based around it. And then every chapter is represented in a frame. And my briefcase reminded me of that, like a story that had never been told. And as I sort of listed things down, I found that it was a sort of technique I started using with the writing so that I could make lists of things. If you read the book, you see there's lists of things that mean something to me, but they're generally contained in something. There might be a box that I've had under my bed as a kid. Lists of things that mean something, but they're contained within something.
So how do you find it that this book is quite experimental in form? Did you enjoy that aspect of like including lists within it and text messages?
Well,
and
I have to say,
photos.
writing the book was terrifying. I've made music for 30 years and found a way, like I say, to move in that world. But writing was terrifying because I hadn't done it since the early 80s. And that was generally essays for university about books I hadn't even read. So I was just like flying by the seat of my pants, like trying to write an essay about some book I hadn't even read anything about, and so sitting down to write it was actually terrifying, and finding myself in a world that I had no reference to. And so I started asking people, what do you do? People I knew. And it sort of, that comes later in the book where I talk about the struggle of writing it. But I reached out to people. I had a chat to Nick about it. He'd ask how it was going. I made Warren Ellis, who's a great script writer. I talked to him about it. I spoke to kids about it. I couldn't kind of get anything on the page. So for me, the process was absolutely riddled with anxiety and constantly feeling like I was an imposter in this world that I didn't belong. And I'm up for sort of taking a risk as much as the next person. And I love that. In music, it's always been the scary things that's attracted me, like that I don't know what's going on with them. Like if we do something and it sounds like T-Rex, you leave that for T-Rex and you kind of find something else, that is kind of terrifying for you because it's a new idea or something that you're not comfortable with. So I like, I've always said I love taking risks and I love being uncomfortable, but this was a sort of discomfort that I just had no reference for, and it was really overwhelming. So for me, the process actually was terrifying for quite a long time, until I almost got to the end. And the people at Faber, in particular, Dan Paps, who was just extraordinary, he kind of shepherded me through the whole process. Alexa at Faber von Hirschberg, she was fantastic. They kind of kept encouraging me and allowed me to find my own way of writing something. Like there was no like, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I had like 400 photos that I had in a file on my laptop. Images of the gum, images of the violin, images of things, images of icons. And I had that as a bit of a storyboard. So I knew basically what the story was, but I didn't really know the rest of it. Like I knew the nuts and bolts of it, but I didn't really know how to draw lines between things. And so I started, compiling big lists of icons that went for like 5 or 6 pages long, and then I just put Nina Simone's gum at the end, and then it sort of, I was talking to Dan and I said, we don't really need that, do we, Dan? And he goes, no, we don't really need that. And then I was like, okay. And I'm like, damn, there goes 6 pages, it was a numbers thing. I was worried because I was contracted to write a certain amount of words. And I was like, God, these are 6 pages, and I was watching the thing go down. And I was like, why don't I make my own lists? And you'll see in the book, I've kind of, the book is my attempt to find my way in the writing process. So there's screenshots of communication with me and Nick or me and Anne, or correspondences with Blethen on emails and things like that. If you read the book, this will make sense. But I found there's something incredibly powerful about a screenshot, for example, of a communication, because you're looking at it in a different way. And as soon as you take that text and you put it on the page normally, it loses a kind of intimacy that, you're looking at a text, because we know this feeling ourselves when we're looking at our own texts, what that it does to us. But then to actually be looking in on two other people's conversation is another thing. So I kind of like the idea of using these, snapshots and actually just like chopping an email and throwing it in there. I mean, when I handed the draft in, the first draft I did, it was just like, like so Frankensteinian. It was email, all different sorts of fonts and things like that, and just, you know, like just things from the internet chopped in, and it changed all over the place. There was nothing that flowed about it at all. But that was my way of, I guess, trying to structure something, or you know, I mean, I have this with music. When, you know, you go and do a film, and it's a massive thing if you think about it, but, you know, I'm able to kind of, or an album, you know, they're big things to do, and I'm able to get an overview at a certain point and rein it in and throw things out. And I guess that's the editing process. And with the first draft I did of it, it really felt like demos that I've done, where you can see there's something like demos in music, you know, where you sense there's something of worth there, but it needs to be sort of pushed around. And there's some ideas from the first, like, you know, I knew I wanted to have lists, you know, after that. I knew I wanted to have screenshots to be included. I'd even like chopped in like YouTube addresses and things like that, you know, like and then I was wisely advised to take them out, because people can't click on it. Like, you can't click on it on the page, and I'd forgotten about that. I just thought, I'll chop that in there. And then you kind of click on that, and then while you're reading it, you're suddenly watching a really cool YouTube video of Arletta singing a song, you know. And I thought, that'd be really great. It's like immersive. And then somebody pointed out that you can't click on a page in a book. So we took them out. But Fable were fantastic in that they let me keep my voice. And anyone that's read it, they say, well, we really know that it's you talking in this. They didn't try and edit it in a way that didn't belong to me. And I'm forever grateful to them for that.
It does feel intrinsically you. And it makes me think about like the ways that you often go back to your very deep sense of like a need to preserve beautiful moments, like with Arletta's music, learning how to play one of her songs off the cuff because you'd lost her cassette, and then, for example, enshrining the gum in silver. How did the book feel? Did the book feel like an act of preservation?
I think it was a way of drawing narratives together in my life, and things that have kind of been anchors for me. You know, when Dan approached me about writing something, which, you know, it was like 2017 or something, and I just said, what, like a memoir? And he's like, maybe. And I'm like, dude, my life is so uninteresting, and I don't want to tell it. Like, I can't even imagine anybody would want to read it, you know. Like, I just didn't see the point of something like that. And weirdly, you know, so I went into this when I had this idea, and I called him, like, hey, Dan, I've got this bit of chewing gum, Nina Simone owned it. Like, I'm getting these photos, it's blowing my mind. It's really beautiful. We're going to do this. We're going to make a sculpture. We're going to like stick one in the Eiffel Tower, like that. He goes, come in and tell us about it. So I went in and presented the idea around a table in front of Jack, the design guy, and Alexa and Dan, and verbally presented the story. After about 45 minutes, they just said, we don't need to talk about this. We'd love you to write this book. So I didn't even know if I could write at that stage. And then when I sat down and I started seeing these threads and a song of our letters that you know, I'd sort of got in 1988 that ended up going through to the Dirty 3 years. Like, it's this song, hang on. Maybe people in the audience might know it. And we kind of go a bit more nuts at that point, you know. anyway, like that. Goes like that. Thank you.
Oh, I feel like we're all going to pass out here. That's so amazing. I feel like that we're all going to remember that, aren't we? So amazing.
That song kind of
It's a classic.
look, yeah, and I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but it becomes another thread. Oh God, I haven't played for 2 years.
A lovely way back.
It became this. It was sort of like a lifeline, that song for me. And weirdly, the first time Nick ever saw the Dirty Three play, you know, like it was a 90-something, you know, and we'd written a whole bunch of original, like about 6 or 7 original songs, and we had that song that we covered. And afterwards, he came up and he goes, "I really like that song of yours." Something like "I Remember a Time" or something. I'm like, "That's the only one we didn't write, dude." But that song became this weird. It was a touchstone for me, like, you know, and it was in the days before you could just Google something and find out where it was. And I had this cassette, I lost it, and all I had was the melody, and the melody stayed with me. And I was really down, and I didn't even realize how depressed I was at the time. It was late 80s. And every time I played that song, it just kind of made everything stop. And so I had this connection to this song, and then I played it to Jim and Mick, and then they worked out how to play the chords and things like that. And then later, when the internet revolution happened, we were able to access these things. But yeah, there's a sort of thread with that song that runs through the book, and meeting Arletta, and I actually I have it here actually. This is a thing that Arletta gave me. It's her marble that I've carried with me.
Wow.
Since 1996 or something. I talk about it in the book, but that's it there. We're going to put that in at Waterstones in the little exhibition that we do when we do a little kick-off for the book in a couple of weeks. I don't generally carry, all the stuff with me, but I happen to have it here for the exhibition. So
I'm sure
don't worry, everybody out there. I'm not totally insane. I'm just. I have a bust of Beethoven here as well.
In your hand.
What a head! Look at that, unbelievable. Yeah, I have that, and I do have a set of my hands in silver if anybody wants to buy them. They're cast in bronze.
I'm gonna save up.
In case you're wondering if I'm not totally insane. I don't carry all that stuff with me. It's just happens to be here when you
just connected to your surroundings as well. Yeah, I feel like Nina Simone's Gum is a portal fantasy. That's how it reads for me. It's just like a portal fantasy. So it's like all of these items are just take us into another realm, and it is really wonderful to think deeply about that through the course of the book. It really is.
Yeah, I think like my son's girlfriend picked up the book the day it was delivered to me. She picked it up and started reading it, and she doesn't know anything about what I do or anything at all. And she started reading it, and she read it, and she doesn't know anybody in the book at all. She doesn't know who Nina Simone is, or she doesn't know the Bad Seeds, anything like that. But she just loved what it was about, that some weird dude had kept this piece of chewing gum, and she loved what it was about, this sort of cosmic thing. And like you say, like a portal to somewhere. And I think, we all have these portals, whatever objects that take us to a place that inspire us to be our better selves, I think.
Yeah, we do. We have about 10 minutes to go to audience questions. So I thought maybe we might open it up to the rest of the room, and you can meet some of us Edinburgh folk and those visiting. That person at the back in the shirt? But, I don't know if you can see me pointing at you, but did you? Or maybe you? So, have I missed a hand? And then I've got, well, while we're waiting for you, I've got a lot of questions that we've been sending in the online chat, like about 15. Do you still believe in people, in their goodness and their ability to create true, valuable connections? Nora.
Yeah, I have
one.
to. I need to, actually. I think last year, you know, as savage as the whole thing was for everybody, the beautiful thing that came out of it was this return to a sense of community, and you saw people checking in to see if you know, if you were okay, people you hadn't heard from. You know, the way people were delivering food to elderly people. That thing that came out of that, I really it really affected me. And you know, like I realized then that I could do things like, you know, donate broken bows to charities, and they could sell them and raise money for you know, homeless kids in Brighton, or bars that were closing down. And it eventually led to me, you know, opening a park for animals in Sumatra with special needs. There's animals that have just been so abused, and I purchased some land and donated it, and we're building this place called Alice Park. And the people that I'm working with all reaffirm, you know, my belief that we can do great things, and I need to believe in that, because I think we can. You know, I don't think we're just here to sort of fuck the planet up. And I think last year, for me, you know, I got caught up in the whole sort of shock of what was going on, and you know, it's the whole rage machine kicking in, and all the political stuff that was going on. And for me, you know, I got sent a bunch of poems by Marianne. She'd read them, Marianne Faithfull, and then she got COVID and she was on her deathbed, and I was told, like, you know, this is probably her last stuff. Do you want to work with it? And I heard the text, you know, the romantic poems, Shelley and Keats and Byron. And I just never heard them like that before. You know, they just came off the page and came to life and reminded me of the wonder that we can do. And I think for me, you know, I realized last year that my you know, my job here is to create. And it made me, and, you know, I wrote the book. I wanted the book to be about the good things, the good that we can do as people, and the beauty of things. Because there had just been so much sort of negative information sort of thrown at us, and some rightly and some wrongly. But the sort of long answer and the short answer is, yeah, I do need to believe in the goodness of people.
That connectivity.
Yeah.
We have a question from Jake Setters. Is there one piece of literature that influences your approach to music more than any others? I know that Bad Seeds take a lot of inspiration from the written word.
You know, I read a lot when I was younger, and then I stopped reading because I wanted to have my own story, and I felt like reading stories, I don't know, it was a sort of young person's thought, I think, at the time, but I just shut the door on reading. And I didn't want to read about being a drunk. I wanted to go out and do it. I didn't want to read about being an addict, or I didn't want to read about being in love. I wanted to go out and do it and on my own terms. And I wanted to find out what it was about and not have somebody else's sort of opinion in my ear about it, or this is how it should be and all that. So I think I shut the door on that. And then, you know, I came back into it in my 30s or something like that. You know, I started reading, but no, the answer is no. There's not any particular piece of literature that inspires what I do musically.
Do we have any questions from the live audience? I'm just passing over there.
What's your name, please?
My name is Catherine. Hello, Warren.
Hello, Catherine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very good.
You mentioned in your list the great legend Jonathan Richman.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your friendship with him, and if he's somebody you admire and have collaborated with or would like to.
I adore Jonathan. I don't think there's anybody in the world that doesn't adore Jonathan Richman. We'd been playing Dirty Three shows in San Francisco for a while, and we were at the Great American Music Hall, and somebody came in and said, "Look, you know, Jonathan Richman comes to your shows and sits outside the hall because he can't deal with the sound, but he'd love to say hello." And I'm like, "Are you joking? The Roadrunner is out there?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Fuck, send him in, you know." So Jonathan walked in, and he just walked in the door and he goes, "Hi, I'm Jonathan." I mean, the guy is exactly what you think he would be. He's just absolutely awesome. He'll call me from a payphone. I'm like, "Where are you, Jonathan?" "I'm in a payphone." I mean, like, who else? You know, he's amazing. He'll come to Paris, and I'll go to the top of the Eiffel Tower with him, or walk up there, or something like that. Go and look at the Chagall and on the roof of the opera there. I've played with him once. He came to Paris one time, and he's like, "Do you want to open for me?" And I'm like, "It'd be the greatest honor of my life." And so I turned up. And I never played on my own before ever, but I was like, "God, I'll give it a shot for you," you know. You know, it's only got to be 30 minutes, and I can do something. And I started setting up, and next thing I look around, Jonathan's sitting on the ground, cross-kneed with his guitar, and he looks at me and goes, "Can I play with you?" And I was like, "Oh, man, of course you can," you know. So I ended up jamming with Jonathan for about 45 minutes, and Tommy, the drummer, he plays with. I don't even know what it was like, but it was just one of the most awesome moments of my life. I love him so much. Yeah, he would continue to write letters to me, and you know, we keep in touch, and you know, I'll go for a walk with him. I mean, you know, I'd had an idea for a book. It's interesting that you raised. I'd had an idea for I wanted to do a program like about 10 years ago, and I spoke to Ian Forsyth about it, and it was where I would interview like the guy that repairs my shoes, or the guy that, you know, fixes my clothes, or the woman who worked at RAK Studios with Mickey Most for years, and these people that I would meet along the way that had these incredible stories that I felt needed to be told. And Jonathan was one of these people who I'd go for a walk with, and he'd go like, "Yeah, and I was, you know, in the rehearsal room, and the Velvet Underground were like doing their first jam on Sister Ray," and I'm like, "Jonathan, you need to write this down." And he goes, "I'd just rather tell you about it." And so he would tell me, tell me stories, you know, about like sitting next to, you know, Ron Ashton's amplifier and stuff like that, you know, like watching the Stooges when he's like 15, you know, sort of thing. And I had this idea to do sort of like short stories of, you know, like I said, you know, and interviewing known people and unknown people, you know, like the guy that mastered all the Bowie records. Like I'd have these conversations with him. These stories that you just never hear, and these people are just like so incredibly gifted. And I wanted to do a book about, you know, like really awesome unknown geniuses kind of thing, but it never happened. But maybe that could be the next one, if Faber can tempt me to kind of, or if they're interested in me kind of, you know, tapping away again. We'll see. But yeah, I love Jonathan Richman.
So yeah, I think that's one of like the beautiful strengths of this book as well, the way that you have all these different people's recollections circling each other, and different versions of an event, and
there's something about the cyclic thing that kept coming to me, and the closure of narratives that suddenly made them eternal, that kept coming up with me. And 20 years later, suddenly I find my violin, or 20 years later, I put the gum into the world, or, you know, there's these things. And I became aware that sort of narratives go along like this, and you kind of, or you do something, and then 20 years later, there's a repercussion for it.
Like a ripple.
And it kind of reconnects you with the original event.
It's I'm going to ask one final question from the audience. This is Tatiana. What do you imagine Nina Simone would say about your book?
I don't know, probably a crazy white boy. What are you doing? You know, I doubt. I don't even think it'd register on a radar. But
maybe we'd finally find out how many pieces of gum it was that she was chewing.
we may indeed find out what the flavour was.
So, I like to think it was watermelon or something like super sweet.
I tell you what, it doesn't smell like anything now. It's just, I've never even touched it. Like, I don't think I ever will. I mean, you know, it's interesting because since I've thrown it out there now, you know, the South Bank have got in touch and they want to archive it now. They heard about it. And I'm going to go and build a big stone copy of it and stick it in a pond of water for the bears and monkeys to climb over in Sumatra when we get the park done. It can, the thing I think the book I sort of tries to lay out is that this is really the beginning and things have happened. You know, like the day I handed in, this is seriously true, the day I handed in the draft, the final draft, and I said, Dan, this is it, we're done. I was cleaning up a house, an apartment, and I found an old briefcase of mine in the back of a cupboard, and I opened it up and it was from the 90s, and inside it was, and until you read the book, this probably doesn't mean much, but inside was a letter from Mick Geyer, who features in the book, a letter from Dave McComb, who features in the book, and a script by Oren Moverman, who features in the book. And two of those people are dead, and I found, unbelievably, the ticket to the Nina Simone concert the day that I handed the draft in. Now, you know, I don't take much stock in that, but God, there was something cosmic going on with that. And it made me feel like, particularly from the point of view of Mick and David, that they were saying, oh, it's okay, kid, you can let it go.
That's, yeah, that's really beautiful, especially when people read this book, they'll see just how important these people's presence as well within your story. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much. It's my first ever talk about a book I've written, so thank you.
Well, it's,
talk. Thank you.
Well, full empathy to you. It's what you describe with your process as a writer. We all relate to that, honestly, and yeah, I think it's quite cathartic what you've created here, and a lot of people will feel that when they're reading it. There's a great sense of journeying through your the way that we belong to one another and the things that we touch. So thank you.
Yeah, the way that we're connected.
Well, thank you so much. And
thank you so much. You've been fabulous, and thank you, people out there.
Thank you.